In order to increase network throughput or add network redundancy to a Linux system, you might want to employ Ethernet bonding. Ethernet bonding, sometimes called NIC teaming, uses two or more network devices to manage a single network address, usually with the creation of a virtual or logical network interface. The logical network interface is assigned an IP address, and the participating physical devices either share the network load, which increases the potential network throughput, or they're run with redundancy in mind, so if one device fails, the other can continue to manage network traffic through the bond. Different Linux distributions have diverse ways to configure a bond. In this demo, I'll demonstrate two methods on two different Linux systems, but these aren't the only methods you can use. Let's start with an Ubuntu Linux system version 20.04. Ubuntu utilizes a network utility called netplan for network configuration. Using YAML files, which are structured configuration files, users enter in the data they want the system to use for network settings, and then apply the settings with the netplan apply command. One quick word about YAML files. They're very picky about structure, specifically indentation and spacing. The YAML specification doesn't allow the use of tab spaces. There's more to it than that, but for our demonstration, that should be enough. Let's check the current network settings for this system using the IPA command. I have two interfaces, one of which is already configured. Currently, this system is using a static IP address, which is defined in the /etc/netplan/99_config.yaml file I created earlier. There's a section in the YAML file for network interfaces listed under a section labeled Ethernets. I need to add a bonds section and specify the bond interface, which is bond 0. I also need to specify which Ethernet devices are going to participate in the bond. These are sometimes referred to as slave devices. Again, I have to be careful with how I structure the file with spacing because this is a YAML file. Now that I've put in the devices, I need to tell the system which parameters to use for the bond. In this case, I'll use the active backup bond mode. This makes it so one device handles all the traffic, but if it stops working for some reason, the other device starts handling it. There are multiple other modes, but we'll focus on active backup for this demo. I also want the bond to use the ENP1S0 device as the primary interface, meaning that traffic will be preferentially put on the ENP1S0 interface and then the ENP6S0 interface if the other device stops working. Now I need to configure the IPv4 settings for bond 0, so I'll add an address with a CIDR bit mask of 24, the gateway, and some name servers. As you can see, there's already a configuration for the ENP1S0 interface. Since the bond will be handling that part, I need to clear the settings for the individual device. I replace it with just brackets. I'll also add in the second interface, which is ENP6S0. I'll quickly double-check that my syntax and settings are correct, and then save the file and exit. To make the settings active, I use the sudo netplan apply command. Let's verify everything is working. Using the IPA command, I can see the bond is indeed running with the configured settings. Let's ping yahoo.com to verify it's routing traffic properly. And it is. We've successfully configured our Ethernet bond on Ubuntu Linux. A Red Hat CentOS system has different components that manage the network, so it uses a separate tool for configuring a network bond. First, let's see how the network is configured using the IPA command. Okay, we have one interface with an IP address and one that's not configured. We'll use the NMTUI utility to create and configure the bond, which is a pseudo-graphical configuration tool for Network Manager. This is the framework for networking on Red Hat CentOS. We'll use the arrow keys or the tab key to move to the selection we want, and then we press Enter to select it. We first want to click Edit a Connection. The only configured connection is the ENP1S0 interface. We need that device in our bond, so we first need to delete the connection, which I'll do now. With that connection gone, I can create the bond by selecting Add, highlighting Bond, and pressing Enter. I need to edit the connection to reflect the settings I want. I'll define the profile name and device settings as Bond 0. I need to add in the slave devices with the Add option. I'll change the profile name and device to the interface name I want to add, which is ENP1S0. I select OK and add the second interface, which is ENP7S0. Back on the Bond 0 connection page, I'll change the mode to Active Backup. Use the Tab key to select the IPv4 configuration option of Manual, and then select Show. I'll add in the static IP settings, including the gateway and DNS information. Okay, the configuration is done. I can select OK at the bottom and exit out of NMTUI. Let's verify it's working. First, I'll run an IPA to see if the configuration looks right. It does. Now I ping yahoo.com to confirm the traffic is routing, and it's working. That's it for this demonstration. In this demo, we walked you through how to configure an Ethernet bond, which is sometimes called NIC teaming, on Ubuntu, Linux, and CentOS.